Today, we're diving into one of the biggest shifts in enterprise technology, the move from static digital systems to living intelligent ecosystems. Today, I'm joined by Ollie Sinclair, CTO at Crimson. In his recent article, The Evolution of Digital Platforms, Ollie explores how organizations can stay competitive through something called composable architecture, hyperautomation, and embedding AI at the core. In this conversation, we go beyond the theory and get into what this actually looks like in practice, where businesses are getting it right, where they're struggling, and what leaders need to do now to stay ahead. I'm Mark Britton. Welcome to the Digital Lounge, and welcome, Ollie. It's great to see you again. How you doing?
Not too bad, Mark. Not too bad. You scared me with living ecosystems. I'm like, oh no, what are we creating in here?
I was going to say, what new monsters are you putting together in the laboratory over there? I suppose that's the obvious first question I'd like to ask, if that's all right. What is composable architecture? What is this thing that you're describing?
Yeah, that's it's a good shout. So yeah, what are these Frankenstein monsters that I'm dreaming up in my basement? So yeah, it's an interesting. So when we look at composable architecture, I think you know it, there's different forms that have happened in the past. It doesn't take too long to then look at back at, okay, well, previously some digital transformation initiatives were around, okay, well, how do we get to a microservices type engagement where there are specific capabilities that do specific jobs, and it's then all pulled together in microservices, and then there's some sort of a controller that controls which capabilities are being engaged. And actually that concept becomes really, really important when we start talking about the latest revolution, which we always talk about, which is generative AI and the democratization of AI as intelligent workers. So then, the microservices thing, there's a bit of a light bulb in there saying, well, actually, yeah, when we're talking about composable platforms, then the concept is it becomes even more valuable when you sit there and go, well, actually, yes, if we have things like MCP, which is Model Context Protocols, which is a way in which agents can communicate with different back-end systems or back-end capabilities and surface those capabilities, the agent, the orchestrator, doesn't really need to know how it does it. It doesn't really need to know any of the nitty gritty detail. It just needs to communicate with a system and go, well, what have you got for me? What tools can you do? What data have you got? And what can I do to get to my objective, which is been set by the context of a user. So composable platforms are going to be absolutely critical for moving from these monolithic monstrosities into something that can actually be switched out when the capability needs to be enhanced. And then it doesn't have this massive dependency impact of breaking everything down just because you want to change one facet and enhance one capability. You just enhance that capability, and then that loose coupling of sort of agent orchestration then is understanding that capability. You've just increased your tool set, and then you can work and do greater things with it. So yeah, it's an interesting time for this sort of concept.
Okay, and in the blog you mentioned about digital platforms no longer being passive enablers. I'm not quite sure what that means, but and you're describing it's now more central to competition. So I suppose first of all, what do you mean by passive enablers, and what has changed in the last few years to make this shift so important now?
Yeah, absolutely. So the big shift is that platforms are kind of become the competitive surface area. So and I kind of break that down into three major elements. Firstly, so if you think about volatility, so organizations, they're constantly trying to respond to whether it's regulation change or cost pressure, or because of the democratization of AI, customers' expectations massive, right? And it's really, really is changing quite quickly. So if you have a slow, brittle, monolithic platform that just can't keep up with dynamic change, then that's going to be an issue. You've got another element of this being the ecosystem reality. So if you think about it, a lot of businesses run across multiple systems. So the competitive advantage keeps from composing those capabilities to be able to move data decisions, not from one big system, but to be able to democratize that out to specialist systems. And then the third part of that is really when you think about how AI is kind of either embedded or has that orchestration layer over the top. If you don't have those flexible platforms that are able to plug and play and enable and disable certain elements of capabilities, it's going to be really difficult to compete in the marketplace. So it's those three things really: volatility, the ecosystem reality, and the introduction of a big wave of AI that's maturing at quite an electric pace.
Mm. I think it's interesting because we've talked over the years about that democratization of IT, citizen developers, and there's always a tension there, isn't there, between that flexibility that you're describing, but having the governance there. And
Mm.
how do we avoid the chaos? Where's the sweet spot?
Yeah, it's a really interesting. The problem is when you think about governance and you think about, okay, you know, how are we going to be able to keep the change, but keep the guardrails on there? And this is the really important thing, and it's a hard lesson learned from Crimson as well, where if you are looking at an adaptive, an ever changing landscape where your ecosystem is constantly evolving, quite rightly, what you don't want to have is a really big governance layer that it stifles the innovation and it stifles that change. But what you do want to have is the right guardrails so that if you do want to change and progress your platform, you are able to do it without jumping through all of these hoops, basically, or making massive mistakes and everything comes crumbling down. So you have to have the appropriate level of governance and the appropriate guidance. But what you want is that level of autonomy. And this is really where we've seen a lot of advancements in things like the design authorities, technical design authorities, and having effectively a Bible of how you're able to change your platform. If everybody subscribes to those guardrails, everybody subscribes to that understanding, then there is a greater level of autonomy of change, because you've kind of said, look, here's the things that you can change comfortably, and here's how you would change them. But then the context is, okay, for this capability, for that capability, for that capability, the change actually might be different. But as long as you're using in the tools in the same way, with the same guidance, you could have that level of autonomy. So you're not always asking your enterprise architect to approve every single solution design. You're not always having to escalate up. You have that level of autonomy, which creates a lot of volume and a lot of resource effort that can work by themselves, which is really, really good.
So I'm guessing from the tone of what you described in the blog, the concept of composability is here now. It's just a rethinking of a reimagining of some of the technology that's already around. Do you have, well, first of all, confirm or deny that my assumption there, but do you see, if that does exist, a standout example of where that is unlocking business value today?
Yeah, so it is. I mean, there are where we look at, 4 years ago, let's say, without any of the smart AI, out the ability to have autonomous agents, the components and the nitty gritty features and capabilities of those components that you had at your sort of in your toolkit to enhance your platform was relatively simplistic. Now it's accelerated and it keeps accelerating. So although effectively, it's still the Lego blocks of capabilities that you want to build up. So you still have Lego with instructions and quality checks, but the pieces are so more advanced than what they used to be because of this AI and non-deterministic capability of them. So yeah, generally speaking, it's just you're adding toolkits to be able to create the platform in the right way. There is differing there's a different level because there are different governance models and governance metrics that you need to have in place. So a cracking example, which I think we've spoken about before, is around the ability to test these types of components that are slightly more non-deterministic. Now, traditional way of testing anything, you've got some, input, process, output, test the results, test the edge cases, try and break it, but really it's relatively, straightforward to kind of test deterministic systems and deterministic workflows, right? But when you get to non-deterministic elements, then there is more of a theory and a confidence of how resilient a certain solution is. And that's going to be giving you, that's going to be measured in a different way. The tools and techniques of how to design the right testing scripts or the right, red teaming element or the right chaos engineering theory will be very, very different to traditional, simple, end user or performance testing you would do on a system. So yes, it is it's all the same sort of building blocks, but it's just enhanced, and because of that, there's a greater consideration. One of those again is around ethics. So it's like, just because you are able to create a certain capability, should you? And we obviously we've been in that in the past in terms of just automation. When it comes to hyper automation or generative AI, there's an even greater responsibility for us to double check that we're doing things ethically. But yeah, the examples that we've seen, certainly in the customers we were working for, my previous podcast when I was in a South London council, that we've been working really, really heavily with understanding how we can build a factory of AI solutions. And that comes with a different governance model. It comes with a different architectural layer, but it comes at because we can create these things quite quickly. There is a lot of effort that's involved in the resilience side as well. So we do have quite some good examples of how we're trying to make these flexible platforms, broken down in their individual capabilities, combined together, orchestrated in the right way, provides a huge amount of value for our customers.
Yeah. You mentioned there hyper automation, and it's a term that's in the blog as well. IT often has that.
Got its own lingo, right?
Yeah. We like to come up with new terms. Is hyper automation really the next wave, or is it RPA or robotic process automation rebadged? What's the difference there?
Yeah, no, honestly, it's really funny because when I think about these things, sometimes I get it right in my head. Then I go away and I think about a completely different scenario. I'm like, oh no, hold on, I'm just contradicting myself here. No, it is. Yes, it is. No, it isn't. So we've landed on the fact that, if you think about hyper automation and how that's different from automation or RPA, RPA for me, in silo, robotic process automation isn't hyper automation in its own right, because it is literally still task based. So if you've got, it often automates a certain step. So an RPA would literally be, you jump on, yes, it seems a lot smarter because it's, maybe UI enabled, it jumps onto a certain website or a certain application, clicks and enters information in for you and processes something, and maybe there's some conditional logic, blah, 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 blah. But if you think about it, it is still just task-based automation, but it's just really, really smart. When we go to hyper automation, that's when you include end-to-end orchestration. So if you think about, you would combine a workflow, you would combine some integration, you would have some embedded AI decision logic or context logic. All of those factors combined each other to get an end-to-end orchestrated automation. That's the difference between, a workflow, RPA, a task, an automation. These are task-based elements. You then orchestrate over a context and maybe an outcome to that. That's really when you're getting into hyper automation world, and that's end-to-end orchestration. So it combines all of those wonderful, some of them massively intelligent automation to be hyper automation. So it does blend AI, RPA, workflows, and it streamlines a whole process rather than just a specific task.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So a lot more sophisticated then. And where are you seeing some quick wins with that kind of powerful technology?
Yeah, funnily enough, two areas. The first area actually around HR, and where there's for big organizations where we've seen quite a lot of hyper automation is in the using a number of tools to be able to help with a massive influx of HR queries and questions. So the problem you have is a traditional workflow or maybe a traditional RPA would be able to tackle some of it. If you're looking at hyper automation, it would be a user comes on, asks a question, inquires about something. It would then, you would know the context. So it could be through an orchestration agent. It would go along, find that answer, but also support that end user or that process in doing some other things. So it might be, well, how much annual leave do I have left? So an agent would sit there and go, okay, well, I know who you are because you're logged in. I know I can access the HR system to be able to find out what your holiday allocation was, and I can then understand what exactly you're after and then send you that initial response. But what I can also do is ask you, you have 5 days left of your holiday. Are you looking to book a holiday? Can I help? Yes, actually, yeah. I just need a couple of days in June just to cover some childcare for the summer holiday. Brilliant. What dates? And it would be able to utilize maybe another workflow with something connected to the HR system to be able to actually submit that HR request and get the holiday booked in. Now, don't get me wrong. You have systems where people can log into HR and self-serve themselves. You have all of these different areas where you used to be able to do that. The problem is always, I can't remember what the HR dashboard was. I can't remember the link to this. I can't remember the link to that. But actually, we've surfaced this within Teams, and therefore, if you're looking at a HR agent, you've got it in Teams. It's like another person you're working for. So as an end user, I'm like, I can speak to HR. I can just type away into Teams and go, what's my holiday? What am I doing? Can I do this? So it feels far more personal, but it also removes you from having to think about, well, I need to log it in that system. I need to update this information here. I need to update that information there. So it controls the whole process. So that's what we want to mean by sort of hyper automation. The other elements is around contract management. Contract management is huge. There's a lot of requirements for suppliers to provide information, evidence about the efficacy of their process that they're doing for an organization, and they usually provide supporting evidence. But it actually takes a human to then work out and understand where they have breached a certain SLA in their contracts, or whether they've done the right work in the right time, X, Y, and Z. And what they tend to do is have people either manually check that or go through different types of systems to check the efficacy of that supplier or that contractor. With hyper automation, you have the understanding of who the supplier is, the original contract they've signed, which includes the SLAs, and you've also then got the evidence that they're supplying to say, we've done this amount of work, or we've done these things, or we've managed these cases. An agent would be able to interpret and understand all of these different data points to provide you an update on how well your suppliers are doing, and whether you need to have that contract management conversation with the supplier with, here's the business value you guys are presenting to me, here's the things you're not performing on. So a massive part of work for local authorities and governance, and we've basically automated that process to give them the right information for then the human to have that conversation with the supplier, be far more informed about what they're doing. So these are the type of things that we're trying to get into at the moment.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think you can see why AI needs to be embedded into this. It kind of deals with the messiness of just being human, and not necessarily following step A, B, C, D in kind of traditional processes. So that it's almost like the glue there, isn't it? That it creates. I'm curious though. So I think it's really interesting. I think I was talking to David Catmull-Lloyd on a previous show about a recent post from Anthropic. Have you seen
Oh
that
yeah.
spider diagram of these are typical jobs where it thinks that there's real potential for automation or replacement of those jobs versus the reality, and there's still a huge gap there. And I think what you're describing sounds like that is the progress to start replacing or enhancing certain job roles. But the big but is there's still a lot of organizations struggling to prove the ROI on AI at the moment. What do you think is going on there? Why aren't we seeing that value necessarily at the moment?
Yeah. There's a couple of answers. The first one, I think we've kind of talked and discussed before, on some of our AI focused podcasts. Um, cultures are a really difficult thing to be able to influence and to be able to understand and be able to manage when you're looking at business change. So the culture of an organization um, can move at quite a slow pace. If you compare that to the pace of technology evolution when it comes to generative AI and the agentic processes that we want, or the transformation that we want to do with our customers, I think where people the people are doing it right are the ones that treat AI as a product and a process change. So it's not a let's pilot something. Let's just think about the technology. You have to think about the process change and as well. You've got to start with measuring the outcomes and make sure that you're kind of connecting the AI solution or the vast improvement of a process to real workflow and data, and also build the governance around that as well. So it's got to be safe. I think that people do consider, just like when we're talking about composable platforms, and we say, oh, okay, well, how would an organization evolve their platform? Well, it's just a technology change. It's like, well, no, it's not. Yes, technology is very, very important, but there is process change. There's a culture change. There's an adoption element to it. So the ones that are getting this right understand what the business value is, measure those out, and able to measure those outcomes, but spend just as much time inventing this technical solution that they are actually then embedding and adopting it. So the embedding and adopting part is, in my opinion, and I'm a CTO, is the hardest part. You've got to make sure that you're taking the culture of the organization along with you. And that might mean that some of the initiatives you want to do that will have a massive return on investment and maybe slightly more delayed because there's a more simplified approach that will actually enable you to get to that big win. So and I talk about this quite a few times. There could be some iterative AI solutions that you can drop into existing process, which increase the maturity and the understanding of the culture of the organization to then be able to take the big transformational change and fundamentally rewrite a process. But you've got the culture to come with you. So that's very much it. I think operating model and governance, building those guardrails, 100%. But it's making sure that you're taking your people with you, and really making sure that there's enough fat in the project to deal with the process change side.
Yeah, yeah. We've touched on this a few times in the show about that importance of adoption and change and how difficult that is. Just coming on to strategy and leadership, then you talk about shifting from, again in the blog, about technology maps and moving to capability maps. Can you explain what you mean
Yeah.
there for listeners?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and this is interesting. So te- te- to simplify it down, like technology maps just says what have we got? What have we got? We've got a bit of CRM here. We got a bit of data in asset management here. We've got some HR system here. Blah blah blah. A capability map is is a kind of definition of what we need to be good and deliver for our customers. What we need to be great at whatever it is. Yeah. So rather than a technology map says we have Dynamics 365 for CRM. So we're, that's what we've got. But the capability map would say we need a CRM solution to onboard customers, resolve service issues, manage risk, and be able to respond to inquiries in a timely manner. That's a capability. Yes, that capability will be met by people, technology, and the right processes. So what we want to do is have the capability maps of business first blueprints. They, to a certain extent, they're technology agnostic because they're all around the ability of the organization. But don't get me wrong, if you're looking at AI transformation, you're looking at digital transformation, it's nice to compartmentalize your capabilities and match it to the technology you currently have. So they should be quite complementary in terms of a technology map and a capability map, but you've got to make sure that you've got your capability map business first. And once you have that, you can then actually, there's the tiering system of capabilities. So you have supporting capabilities, enabling capabilities, and operating capabilities. And you've got those dependencies between them as well. Really, really important to map that out as an organization so you understand what you need to be great at what you're doing, to then actually then look at the technology stream of that, the people stream of that, and the process stream of that.
Brilliant, brilliant. Ollie, I'm really conscious we're fast running out of time, so I'm going to ask you one more question if I may. So just looking forward, what trend in these digital platforms are there that people aren't talking about enough yet? What are you seeing that you just people need to be aware of?
Yeah, that's fine. So two things. The first one, agent governance and identity. So this is a really interesting concept. So at the moment, we've got, as you said, we've got some automation. We've got RPA here. We've got workflows here. We've got A, B, and C, RPA going on over here. When you start orchestrating that and it starts to own a process, and I'll go back to my previous example of that HR agent. That's useful to call it a HR agent, but actually what you want to drive is the culture of adoption. Sometimes putting a persona onto the top of a HR agent, so they're more sort of digital actors with permissions, tends to really influence where the next capability of your HR agent is going to go. So rather than calling it HR agent, call it, Ollie Sinclair, HR specialist. I'm going to talk to Ollie about my HR problems, right? Or I'm going to talk to Ollie about understanding the process of annual leave. You start to personify these so that your agent becomes effectively augmented as a part of your team. Now, the reason you want to do that is because, again, that culture message, that embedding and adoption message is you want to start your organization to treat multi-agent systems as the norm. So so the hard problem is, who do we trust? Like how can these agents act like they would do replacing a certain person's role or a certain function of someone's role? Well, you would personify that and you would make that. So I think multi-agent systems and making an identity for these agents is going to accelerate us to the next level where, and Microsoft have coined the phrase agent boss. So when we're into the frontier firms of the world, where rather than just me being, Ollie Sinclair at work at HR, I'm Ollie Sinclair that's orchestrated over a number of sub-agents. So I'm an agent boss. So if somebody, if I'm trying to, rewrite a HR policy, I'm going to go and actually orchestrate a couple of agents to start writing me that, do some background research, considering my pool of influences, the pain points from a survey that's been sent out to 1,000 people. All of these elements, I'm going to actually get my agents to disseminate, understand, collate, and present to me maybe the first draft for me to review on a new policy for a new initiative that we're doing. This is going to be the world that we're going to start to come into, where more and more people will be augmented, and rather than just doing, Googling for yourself, submitting, receiving all of the information from the survey yourself, or doing some background research into HR policies for a certain subject, you're going to get your agents to do that for you. So you're effectively managing agents. Becoming an agent boss does help if you've got the personas and the governance right and the identity right. Once you've got that, then hopefully the organization is then going to start to adopt to that better. But that's really the key. That's what not many people well, they're starting to talk about, but not many people are really coming up with evidential elements of that. But multi-agent systems and how we become effectively agent bosses is really going to be the conversation for next year.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's fascinating, and I often wonder about, with the consumerization of IT, how we experience this kind of technology in our own lives, and that often sort of drives some of that change, doesn't it, in the workplace. So I think as we start to see the likes of, I mean, Alexa's now, it's funny, isn't it? Our expectations of what we ask from these things is changing. If you ask
Yeah,
Alexa, and
yeah.
it's pretty stupid, really, compared to, say, using Copilot.
Mhm.
I think as those start to improve, and you can have better conversations with those that might be in your an Alexa in your kitchen, that's going to shift expectations more as the next generation come through as well into the workplace. Mm. Interesting stuff. Interesting times. Ollie, if there are any, if there's anybody listening at the moment that's thinking, we want to start thinking about this in our own organisation, what's the best way that they might do that with Crimson to get the ball rolling with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that first and foremost, reach out to Crimson to have if you're thinking about your AI strategy, if you've got started with your strategy and you're stumbling, and if you want some consultancy advice, we're ready and available. And considering we've been talking for half an hour, it's a passionate subject of mine and my consultants. So we're really keen to speak to anybody that's looking at their AI transformation. They've got maybe some strategies that they want to bounce off us, or if they want us to do a deep dive and understand, okay, you've got a platform. Where should we take this platform? How do we embed AI into this platform? Where do we go in terms of iterating over this, or actually going for some big bang elements? We've got lots of advisory services that we can offer. Anything from after the possible sessions with things like M365 Copilot, all the way up to talking around AI transformation framework and the trust framework that we have. We've got a lot of knowledge and a lot of consultants ready and waiting to sort of help out you guys to push into your next transformation.
Amazing stuff. Well, it's lovely to have you join us on the Digital Lounge. I'm sure you'll be with us again soon, Ollie. Until then, take care, and we'll see you all again on the Digital Lounge. Thank you.